Hey friends, Joseph with Better Builds. We're going to talk about how you can take your moldings from crappy to crispy today, and how you can use moldings and millwork to tell a better story about your home and the place that you live. Today we're talking about millwork, molding, doors, and making trim selections. And I think it's really crucial that if we're gonna do that, that we understand some of those terms. So we're gonna pull you into this window and we're gonna kind of go over what some of these things specifically are. This portion here, which is the interior of a window or a door, that's called a jamb. This portion here, if it projects from the wall, is called a stool. This piece below it is called an apron. Some of you may know the stool as a sill. If you were on the exterior, it's typically called a window sill. And then these pieces of trim around the window are called casing. This is a mitered joint, and this is a butt joint, right? It's cut square. This is cut at 45 degrees. Our apron also is the same profile as the casing, and it has what's called a mitered return there. Maybe I'll take you over to a door and show you some other stuff. All right, let me show you some of the same details on a door just so we have some of the same terms. Okay, so these are the hinges, right? There's our casing. This is our jamb, right? I'm gonna show you the jamb from a better angle. This portion here specifically is the jamb, okay? This is your door stop. When the hardware is installed, this will be the strike plate. This portion here that receives the lock is called a mortise. And then this is the mortise boring on your door latch side. And then this is the boring for installing your handle set or your lock set, depending on the application. Oh, I almost forgot. This one's kind of important. Door stop. Well named. What does it do? It stops the door. Door stop. The other thing I would point out is the style of this door. This is what's called a 2-panel door, right? Pretty straightforward. There's 2 panels. If you look over here, this is one of the older doors. This is just a temp door. This would be a 6-panel door, if not for what's called a half light in it, right? Whenever you hear a half light or a full light or quarter light, they're talking about how much glass is in the door. All right, I'm gonna show you a bundle of different millwork and molding options that is a great catalog to start with. It was provided to me by our friends over at Windsor One. They make lots of great exterior trims and then also interior trims. And they've worked with a few different designers to achieve that. Most namely, they've worked with Brent Hall of Hall Millworks to sort of bring back some of these historic moldings. Even if you're not necessarily concerned about matching some historic precedent, one of the great things about like working with a catalog from someone like Windsor One is that they will do the work of sort of pairing things together with you. So let me pull out the roll and we'll kind of get into it. Also, if you're a builder or even just a trim carpenter and you want to kind of level up your own understanding or be able to show something to a homeowner or a client about what's kind of out there and what options there are available, having something like this in your repertoire is really great. If you're not familiar with Windsor One, I would definitely recommend you reach out to them. Actually, on any of the back of their products, they'll actually have a phone number and you can call Kurt, get a shirt. That's sort of written on the back. This hat's a Windsor One. Really appreciate what they're doing in the industry, sort of making craftsmanship accessible, right? They're really pushing that we make better decisions about our moldings. On that note, all of our moldings and all of our millwork is going to be solid wood or it's going to be finger jointed. Sometimes it's pine, sometimes it's poplar, but we stay away from MDF, medium density fiberboard. You'll see that used in cabinet production. You'll see it used in millwork and molding and doors. And if you've ever seen, oh, that's frustrating the heck out of me. If you've ever seen a piece of base or even a piece of casing where you can tell where all the nails went in, because the MDF kind of explodes around that nail because it's not solid. Whereas if you're working with solid wood, yes, you will dent or you will puncture the wood, but it's easy to fill. You don't have to sand away a product that is essentially tiny little flakes of sawdust. So anyways, tangent. This role is a really helpful place to sort of understanding what's in the market, what our options are, and sort of pairings, what goes with what goes with what period. This house specifically, we actually opted for, it's sort of like a Princeton profile, which you can see on this window behind me. This actually was the same molding that we used, or that was in this home originally. It's a 1947 home. Not necessarily, didn't have the most character. It had sort of some elements of period revival, which would be roughly 1900s to 1940s here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, in this area. That period seems to, that's where I seem to find that stuff. By the time you get into the 40s, it's sort of this amalgamation of weird different styles. You're starting to get some ranch coming into it. You're starting to get some of the sort of mid-century modern things happening. And so this home was actually a good example of sort of those differences. But if you'll look at some of these moldings, one of the things you'll notice is how crisp and clean the lines are. So one of the flaws with using an MDF or even particle board is that the intention of the molding or the actual aesthetic or the look of it is lost to sort of a mushy, there's a loss of the depth of everything. Everything just kind of gets scaled down into smaller sizes and less thick, and you sort of lose all of this sort of profile that's happening in it, all right? On this home in particular, one of the things that, like I pointed out earlier, is the stool and apron. It's sort of a historic detail that's just gone away. A lot of times today you'll see just 4 mitered corners, right? Down here you'd come down to a mitered corner and they call that a picture frame, right? There's certainly a time and a place for that, but when you think about sort of honoring maybe something that was previously existing in the course of a remodel, and you had stool and apron, to me it's sort of sad that you would tear that out and opt for a picture frame unless you're doing some very super high modern sort of details. One of the other benefits might be, if you're like me and you have a cup of coffee or you have a drink, this ledge now becomes a viable option for your homeowners when they're entertaining. If you actually can spin this way and look at this other big bank of windows, you can picture once that's installed that suddenly becomes a functional space for when you're entertaining and you're hosting and you have guests in your home. All of a sudden now it starts to become a place where people congregate, where they can set their drink down. And whether we understand intellectually or we're actually comprehending that these details are nice, or we don't, whether it's happening subliminally, subconsciously, using solid wood communicates, because those lines are crisp, it communicates that someone took their time, that they cared, that there was a craftsperson that worked on this home. All these little things like the scale and proportion of a molding and the fact that you actually have an edge here and that you can actually see a radius here help to communicate not only where am I, when am I, right? It communicates a time and a place, but it also helps to communicate that this is solid, that this is quality, that you can sort of touch and feel that. And if you, for example, were hanging out and you had that drink in your hand and you're leaning against that stool, it's going to feel solid, it's going to feel substantial. You also, even just for the scale of things, like this, for example, is 3/4 of an inch, right? We selected 5/4, right? So it's only a 1/4 inch more, but again, these little, and I'll just be honest, I'm stealing this from Brent Hull. If you want to nerd out about this, he's got lots of great content on YouTube and Instagram about it. But he talks about making good decisions about builds is sort of a series of picking 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%. It's the accumulation of well-selected details that are thought out, that fit a certain time period or fit a certain style or aesthetic, and how it's not just that one thing or these two things, it's the compounding interest of several of those things. I kind of feel like I should pull a couple of these pieces out and kind of show people our moldings. Okay, so if you've been looking around and paying attention, obviously we haven't installed base yet, so I needed to go cut some so you could take a look at the profile. But I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk a little bit about scale as well. That's really important when we're considering moldings and millworks. Millwork in a house is, what size should I get it? So for example, you can get a very similar profile to this base, and you can get it in a 3.5 or 3 1/4. You can get it in a 4.5 or a 5 1/4. You can get it in like 6 or 7 1/4, and maybe even in like a 12 or 11 1/4. Those, and that just kind of depends on the height of your ceilings and your space. This is very similar to what we found in the home originally. The only difference is that there was, about 1.5 inches less. Throughout the course of this remodel, we ended up actually raising the ceiling. We took out the half story and went up a story in order to sort of communicate a little bit more sense of scale and a little bit more grandness. We decided to just simply add a little bit of more height or depth to our base. And what this does is, okay, yeah, you could just, for example, put 12-inch base in here and people would be like, oh wow, that's big base. But what that would do is sort of skew your perception and the scale of the space. When you walk into a space where the scale is considered and the proportions are considered, it will do more to communicate craft and concern and that this has been thought about than if you just simply pick big things, right? So we've kind of talked a little bit about how like nailing the millwork on a project or doing things well isn't just picking one or two things. It's a series. It's an addition of things, right? It's many things adding up to a sum or a total of something significant. I think actually this window behind us that's done is really a great example of scale, in the sense that because this is 5/4 rather than 3/4, right? 5/4 meaning it was started as 5/4 thickness at the sawmill, and they had to surface it down to finish at 1 inch, right? If you're interested in talking about nominal versus dimensional numbers, we can nerd out about that because I actually grew up on a sawmill. But anyways, back to this scale. Using the appropriately sized trim or casing, the stool, and the apron communicates a sense of hierarchy and belonging and what space am I in? Is this a private space? Is this a public space? And it helps tell the story of a home in a way that's warm and inviting and thoughtful, rather than being in a home or like, what it's like when you're in a commercial space and everything is sort of big and lacks detail. And there's a time and a place for that, right? There's a purpose for that. But in a home, we want things to feel warm and cozy. Part of how you do that, a small percentage of that, is picking the right size moldings and millwork, right? Regardless of any historical precedent or how you might feel about a particular style or a time and a place. One of the things here, it would be great if you actually kind of pulled in a shot here so you could see this. I want you guys to see how this is laid out. It's really helpful if you're getting started to have something to reference. So whether if you don't have access to Windsor One, or maybe you're just not ready to commit to something like that yet, go talk to your local lumberyard. Go find someone who specializes in moldings and millworks, and that's what they produce. Do not go to a box store to buy this stuff. If you check out our Instagram, there's gonna be a reel about hollow core versus solid core doors, which is another one of those calculations of quality versus sort of just going with the flow or the budget option, if you will. By selecting, solid wood trims, solid core doors as opposed to hollow core doors, we tell a better story in our homes and in our buildings. But if you're just like new and you're intrigued and you're trying to figure out like, there's so much to learn, right? I'm with you. I get that. I feel that way all the time. And I grew up on a sawmill. I have been wearing a tool belt for almost 20 years. And I still am learning something every day about what belongs with what period and what time and place, and is this colonial revival, is this craftsman, is this period revival, is this Greek, is it colonial, is it, right? There's so much more out there than what a box store tells you, right? The story that they're telling is, you can buy this today, it's available, you don't have to plan ahead, it's cheap, but ultimately those things are disposable. And as a builder and as a homeowner, we can do better. Just flat out, you can do better than walking into a box store, and you know who I'm talking about, right? The big box stores, and picking a molding. Take some time, consider it, think about where you live. Is there a precedent in the place that you live? Does your neighbor's house have a piece of molding that's original, right? That you just sort of like, maybe you haven't thought about it before, but if you're thinking about doing a remodel, even if it's just a bathroom remodel, even doing simple things like making sure that the doors match, right? We talked about panels a little bit earlier. This communicates a time and a place. So if you're about to do a remodel, don't make your bathroom feel like a different time and place. Don't make your kitchen feel like a different time and place, unless that's your goal. One more note on hollow core versus solid core doors, right? We talked a little bit about MDF versus solid wood trim or finger jointed trim. If you opt to use a hollow core door, it's gonna look fake because the wood grain is simulated, it's not real. You'll notice on this door there isn't actually wood grain. This door is actually very smooth. However, in contrast, if you look at our cabinets, right? If you look at the cabinets here, you can actually see the wood grain. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is that door has an MDF skin, even though it's a solid core door. And what that does is allow for a really nice finish. But we wanted the texture of wood grain on these cabinets. So these are actually oak. These are red oak cabinets. These are custom built. We were toying with some stain options. The clients love green. And regardless of whether you love the color of this kitchen or these things speak to you, the fact that you can see this wood grain and that you can feel it, and it communicates something, right? It brings some warmth, it brings some texture to the home. So don't fall into the trap of just picking what's available. There's a lot of options out there, and perhaps they're actually not as expensive as you think. I think there's a big misconception out there that, like, in order for me to have nice things, I have to spend a lot of money. I think that there is some truth to that. I think what's more true is that in order to have nice things on a budget, you have to be more thoughtful. You have to be more involved. You have to be more considered in those things, and you can't just run out the next day and go buy what you want. You have to find someone that you can build a relationship with and that can help you get the right product. Yeah, I don't know if maybe you guys will be super curious about this and you want to nerd out about it. I'd love to dive into some conversations about what kind of molding you're using in millwork. I'd be super curious where you guys are buying your products from. And frankly, if you don't know where to start, especially if you're in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, I'd love to steer you in the direction of some great local shops. All right, we've talked about moldings, we've talked about millwork, we've talked about MDF, solid wood versus hollow core door versus solid core door. Hopefully we've left you with some sense of scale and proportion and equipped you to make some better decisions. But I'd love to know what you're curious about. Jump in the comments, let me know if you have some comments, some thoughts. If you are a builder or a carpenter, maybe jump in and let people know where they can source the real stuff, not the stuff that's available on box stores. Really looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks for spending some time with us today, folks. Have a good one.